And we're back.
I don't know if Andrew started doing that for his weekly worship services, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the week's like a long commercial break.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, we're back.
And he's like no one finds it funny, but he still does it anyway. That's amazing.
And
I find it
you
funny.
find your own joke funny.
Yeah, I find it funny. I'm just saying people in the congregation, I don't know if they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been calling them, and we got a church director, and we've been calling them, and turns out they do not think.
The other thing I actually wanted to ask you about is, and this isn't the topic we're going to talk about, but I wanted to ask you about, and this isn't making fun, I want to know how you get away with it, is I swear in the last, for this past Sunday, when you did finish the gospel, that you were like, in the gospel of the Lord.
I was like, the gospel of the Lord.
That's amazing.
Well, we get those gospel readings where they're just like so like fire and brimstone.
Screw everyone.
And I'm reading and I'm like trying to make my voice deeper. And then we get to the end and I look at everyone and I'm like, that's the gospel of the Lord.
Yeah. And so God the Father shall judge all of you likewise who do not forgive. Yeah.
Yeah, they talk about being tortured in perpetuity, and you're like,
Yeah.
I know how I can take the sting off this.
Yeah.
With some folksy wisdom, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Chef's kiss. All right. So the topic today.
So you have to edit all that out.
No. Oh, no.
Oh, no.
That's the snappy stuff.
Yeah. That's the stuff people tune in for, Andrew.
Oh,
so that is, I will remind you, the weddings, funerals, and fires video still has the most views.
Yeah, that was a fun video. And we still have 75 minutes of unaired footage from that conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say the topic today, that I think something I want to point out to people if they do actually watch this, is the topics. We don't prepare for these. I'm not saying it comes across like we do, but we don't prepare for them.
I don't think anyone's surprised by that. Actually.
No, I don't think anyone was like, what? So some of us just learned what the topic was about 30 seconds before we hit record, and it is hospital calls. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'm going to start. I'm not going to tell. I have a couple things I was thinking about, but the first one is I had a hospital call that changed how I approach people. Because I used to always go into the hospital and I'd say to people like, hey, so now that we're done, is there anything I can do for you before I leave? Because I thought that was respectful, kind, compassionate. And so one guy, his name was Boogie. He was the best man at this dude's wedding. They lived next to each other in this trailer park. And so Boogie goes, yeah, man, actually, I need you to scratch my back.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm sorry, what? He goes, dude, seriously, if you want to help, scratch my back. So, he's in a hospital gown. So I like kind of reach, the hospital gown's open. So I like reach down and it's between the panels. I'm like, it's just
did you know where to stop? Did your hand instinctively know where to stop or no?
It turned out that he was going to coach me through the scratching.
I was waiting for that one.
I'm like, oh God, because it's that part of the back that he's never touched because he can't reach it. So I'm like, oh, there's so much like dead stuff. And he's like, harder. Like, he's like, yeah.
It was like a snake just came into its new skin after you were done on your hand.
Yeah. Basically, he like molted and left the hospital. So I just like come out of my hand.
You're leprosy no more.
They're like, what did you do? And I'm like, I did what I had to. My hand was like a claw after that because I had all this stuff. So like,
your hand, it was white, ashen white, like Miriam. It was like,
It was like the hand of Moses.
Wow.
Bring it back out.
Yeah.
Look at that. That was an advanced bibiblical reference for
Did
the
you like
audience.
that? We just put that in there.
You guys put in like Book of Numbers. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
So then I was just like, oh, thanks. And then I go and wash my hands. And he's like, all right, thanks for coming. And I'm like, no, I'm not done washing my hands. So went in the next room, washed my hands, squirted every hand sanitizer in the hallway.
Mop bucket on the way out.
Yes, that's right.
Ringing it.
I just lit up my barbecue and held my hand over it. So it was my own fault. Like, to his credit, I asked him if I could do anything. And he's like, since you said anything, So I don't ask that anymore. Yeah. I haven't asked that question since like 2007.
That's a great story, because I will not ask that from now on. I usually ask the same thing. Anything I can do.
Yeah, let me be a warning to you.
from beyond the grave. I
Yeah,
speak
that's
to
right.
you. Oh my
You know,
gosh.
the thing I love about you guys is you all have learned things in ministry.
yeah.
I just
Well,
beat my head against the same wall. It's like,
Will,
no, it doesn't-
they have to you have to be let out of that room before you can experience the rest of the world
Yeah, that's
to know
right.
what's
Yeah.
going on. Yeah.
And all Will's stories start, I was looking out the window behind me.
It's so good. All right. So somebody else have something?
so I'll throw one in. So we got a call like the middle of the night, and the family wanted me to come and pray with this gentleman because he was getting ready to die. And
Wait, all right, just real quick. Are we taking a turn from kind of fun story into like super serious land? Do I have to prepare myself? Okay.
That's
all right.
right.
Thank you.
No.
Yeah, he was about
So
to
they,
die. Okay,
so
okay.
you know, they, you know, and it speaks to, you know, kind of people's experiences. Like, you know, within the church, we don't have Lutherans in the church. We have Methodist Lutherans and Catholic Lutherans and Baptist Lutherans.
Oh
and,
yeah.
you know, like they come from all over. And so they wanted me to come and give last rites. I was like, all right, yeah, I'm happy to come and pray with you. You know, so we get in there, and this was early on in ministry, like really early on. So like I still had my little green book. You remember the little
Oh,
green
I
book?
carried that around, yeah.
Yeah, that Thrivent gave us, or whoever it was, and so I, you know, I go through the book, and I've got, you know, prayer by bedside, and I start, and I get in there and talk to the family for a second. I get in there and I talk to the family. Right, I'm talking to the family, and the gentleman's laying on the bed, and, you know, he's not moving, and so then it was like, okay, well, you know, can I pray with you? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And so I walk over and I open up the book because I marked it before I came in, and I start to read. And as I start to read, his wife leans in and says, you know, he's dead.
Was he just staring at you? Did you not
He
know?
was just, yeah, he was just kind of, no, his eyes were closed, you know, like it really looked like
he was peaceful.
And so that early on in ministry, there was no on the fly. It was like, well, that doesn't work anymore. Like,
Yeah.
Where's the prayer for
so
the
I just
recently
closed
dead
the
guy?
book.
Yeah, it's like, all right, that's on this page. So.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh my gosh.
There is a dynamic where people say they really want a Catholic priest, and you're the closest thing they can find.
Yep.
So I've had lots of that where you walk through the hospital and they go, oh, Father, can you come over here? And I go, well, yeah. Will you pray for him? And I go, well, it may not take because I'm a Protestant. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And then if they think there's a better chance that someone closer to a priest will come, then they'll like go, no thanks. But if they think I'm their best shot,
Yeah.
then they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And especially like what you just said, if they're dead and like priest won't come, they're like, just pretend you're a priest.
Yeah. I cannot tell you how many of those stories I have when I was a chaplain at the hospital. Yeah,
Because you served, just for our people watching, you served while serving in ministry. You also served part-time as like an overnight chaplain.
If you watched our other videos, the hospital where the dude
with the rifles,
yeah, that one, that was it.
You know, if you'd had that beard back then, Andrew, they would have mistaken you for Greek Orthodox.
Yeah,
so, I received that as well.
Yeah. So this is
So
all right. So
what would you say, Andrew?
Yeah. When you were at the Dukes of Hazzard Hospital, Hazzard County, what
would you wear a white suit and a white hat? Have a cigar in your mouth?
Boss hog. And they'd be like, Pastor Andrew's got himself in another pickle. How he get himself out of this one?
Wow, we just went there. That's great. No, seriously. So I would say the same thing. You know, I said, oh, I'm Lutheran, and they're like, what is that? And I said, oh, Protestant. Oh, and then either it would be, well, that's good enough, or it's like, well, can you call the priest, because it was a Catholic affiliated hospital, and the priest lived a block away. But I cannot tell you how many times I called the priest, and I'm like, yeah, we have someone that wants last rites. And this priest would always say, well, are they like really almost dead? Or...
It was like an OBGYN. Like, how many centimeters are they dilated towards death?
Yeah.
I mean, Will, if you had asked that question, that experience would have been so much different for you.
That's right.
Yeah. The priest is like, and it was the same priest. He'd always had an excuse. He wouldn't come over He's like, oh, well, it's snowing. And I'm like, it's July. And yeah, he's like, well, are they really going to die? Or, well, maybe I can work it in tomorrow. So then you have to go back and be like, yeah, the priest isn't coming. And they're like, well, you're good enough. Do something. So
I do think that should be the new tagline of the ELCA.
Yeah.
ELCA, that's good enough.
You're something.
Yeah.
You're something.
Yeah.
See,
I
I've
can't
done
get a
it.
priest. I'll take you.
It depends what kind of mood I'm in. If I'm in a playful mood, I will go in and pretend to be a priest, and I'll do it, and I'll be like, I'll go, no, they're already in hell, and then I just walk away.
Oh.
So yeah, that will get edited out. But
I know that, leave that in there. That's good. Yeah.
I did that.
People
I
love
did
it.
that.
Those moments of grief, they love those jokes.
Yeah. I'm
Do you
sorry
remember-
you're in pain, but I'm having a good day.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you remember? I think it was Kevin that
I do remember him.
there was a fellow that
Good. Will, do you remember Kevin Heinbus?
Yeah.
and come out with snow.
Will,
Right, go ahead.
draw a K on your board. We worked on that yesterday.
So
but he
yeah,
had somebody in jail that he was trying to see, and they wouldn't let him in because he wasn't credentialed or whatever. And so he went home and made up a certificate on his computer and used a bunch of Latin words.
Yeah.
And wore his collar in and said, here's my certificate of ordination. They let him in.
That's
Kevin
so
would do.
awesome. We had a hospital where a guy, they wouldn't let me. I went to the same hospital all the time, and they wouldn't let me in. And they go, oh, sorry, we had to change our security protocol because a guy was dressing like a priest and stealing things out of people's purses.
Yeah.
No, anyone dressed like a priest, we can't. And I go, but I come here. And they're like, yeah, we know, but the new protocol. So then we were there to visit this dude that had come in an ambulance, and the doctor goes, how do you know him? He went through like 25 questions. How do you know him? What's your relationship to him? What's his connection to your church? Where does he live? Who's this other person with you? And then we finally get through all the things, and he goes, yeah, he already died. Why'd we go through all that?
he died around question 8. You needed to be faster.
If you had printed off a certificate, you could have gotten in sooner.
Yeah, that's there is a lot of confusion. And for me, and this isn't funny necessarily, but when I'm wearing my collar, especially like in a hospital setting, the responses that I get from people are either very positive or the complete other side of the spectrum. Like people won't even look at me, like once they see the collar. So it's like people either really have like a respect level, or they go the opposite direction and are just like, yeah, you guys are jerks. I feel like
What's the most negative reaction you've gotten when someone saw your collar?
Someone spit towards me once. And then somebody intentionally looked back and did not hold the door open. Like they were going to, and then they looked up and then they walked in. And I was just like, I still have to come in. Like we have to ride in the elevator together, like I still have to do this.
What about you, Will and Andrew? What's the worst response you've gotten to someone seeing you in a collar? Or your Boss Hog outfit?
Well, there's a few of them that probably shouldn't be in this video. But yeah, I mean, it's been something similar. Like, it's funny that you said that, Jeff, because I went to do a hospital visit and someone like closed the door. They looked at me and they closed the door. And I don't know if it's just like getting used to New York or whatever, but I called them out on it in there. I'm like, because I said that. I'm like, we got to go up the elevator together. And they're like, what? I don't what? Like,
I can take the stairs. I'm not going. Like, if you take the stairs, I'm taking them too.
Wherever you go in the hospital.
Well, I'll wear my collar and then you can't see it under here. So I'll go like to the nurse's desk or whatever. And they're like, yeah, what do you want? And I'll be like, oh. And they're like,
I love that you lift your beard up as part of your credentials.
Yeah, I do.
While I lift
make
my
that
beard.
noise too. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
You should. Yeah. I hope you keep a lot of stuff under there, and they're like, "That's not good enough." You're like, "What about a candy bar?" Oh.
I'm like, "Here's a Dorito." Oh. And then I eat it.
Yeah, they're like, it's half true.
You're like, that was for me. I'm my own vending machine.
I usually have fun though because
but now for me, there's a huge difference. So like we were saying, like we're talking about chaplaincy when we had to serve as chaplains and now serving in calls. in congregations, that in chaplaincy, it's like going on cold calls for sales, because you don't know the person, you don't know what you're going to get. So with, members, there's a little bit more familiarity. However, I had one time, and so I've changed I learned from this. Another member of the congregation called me and said, "Do you know so-and-so is in the hospital?" And I said, "No." And I was, gave me the room number for this person. And I was like, "All right, great." And I went over to the hospital, go up, get in the room, and walk in, and the woman looks at me and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, well, so-and-so called me, your friend called me." And she ended up not being super mad, but it wasn't so much she didn't necessarily like me, which I don't think she did, but it was more of a situation where some people I know myself, they want privacy. They didn't want to have me or anybody else come in. And so the fact that somebody else told me out of care and compassion for this individual, she didn't give that information out. So I've had to change and tell parishioners now, look, I have to hear from the person or a family member, and I can usually that, I don't go, because there are times and a few other times I've gone, and it's the person didn't necessarily want me there. And that's just an awkward experience where you then know they don't want you there, and you still have to see each other. And so it's oh, okay, how do we make this better? So I'm going to let my dogs out.
Okay. Jeff brought up a good point too, which is the cold calling.
Yeah.
I mean, that is when you think about it, and him saying that, it's such a bizarre thing that we were expected to do. Someone's in the hospital, when we worked at the children's hospital, some of us, and you walk in there, and it's their kids are in the hospital. This is the worst time in their life. And someone cold calls an encyclopedia salesman, "Hello, good morning." You're everything, and they're "Yeah, everything's fine. Why are you here?" "Because I want to connect with you." But I did sell 5 timeshares.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah. On the neurology floor. We were talking, Jeff, about the phenomenon of cold calling people, wondering if we can meet some unspoken spiritual need that they themselves haven't articulated, but they feel bad that we're there. So they're "Yeah, maybe you could pray for pray for your son that has a brain shunt." And they're "Nah, don't pray for him. We're good."
Yeah. And that is, most of the time, and I wish this were funny, but a lot of times, I'll see if I can find one that's attached to this. I'm there visiting, not so much the person who's there, but if they have family members there, it becomes I'm doing a pastoral call for the family members. Yeah. And the person in the hospital bed just kind of "Yep, all right, you can go whenever you want." And the other people, are "Oh, have a seat." And I'm "Oh, okay, we'll be sitting down now." And this visit just became, so to kind of gauge between, if you're there to visit a little bit, check, see how they're doing, say a prayer. But beyond that, you're just hanging out, which is okay, but it can be difficult. Then have you ever had to figure out a way to get out of a room when you felt like you had been in there too long?
I always have a verbal cue, because I think there are times. Oh wait, Will, are you talking?
Grandpa.
Yeah, good. Will.
Grandpa, hit the mute button.
Yeah. No, the applesauce is coming.
My gosh.
It's on the way.
I'm leaving all of this in, just so you know, Will. Right.
I always just give a verbal cue. There are certainly times where I feel my time has. They were happy I was there. We've said a prayer. We visited, but you can tell they're over it or they don't feel well. And so I always just have a verbal cue of "Well, thank you so much for having me," or "Thank you so much, or good to see you," or I'll let you know. And then everyone always knows when someone does that verbal cue where it releases all the pressure in the room. Mm-hmm. And they're "Okay, bye."
Will, do you want to contribute verbally now or no? Oh my gosh.
No, what came to mind for me, and this is taking it to a kind of a very serious level. Probably going back to one of the worst. It was my first, in a sense, cold call when I was at Children's, and I was on call, so the whole hospital and whatever. But it was in the NICU, and it was the nurses knew the whole situation, but no one told me anything. And it was for a woman, and this was her 7th child, but none of them had survived, and this child was at the brink of death. And I walked through, because it was just a curtain. I walked through that curtain, and I couldn't. She only spoke Spanish, but I knew exactly what she was saying because, there were some Diablos thrown in there, and and I was the angel of death. That's probably the worst. I mean, that was the worst thing because, I was the angel of death walking in there. And I mean, she knew exactly who I was and why I was there. And that's what I represented. And that was just absolutely horrible.
Yeah. You are muted. I know you say you're not, but you are muted. No, hey, can you reboot your Gateway computer from 2001? And
it's Gateway 2000. Because I just made my last payment. Are you still paying for an AOL account?
Are you talking? Can we hear you?
Come back out.
I can't.
Go out and come back in.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you. Like, I wish we could. Like, we weren't joking. We could not hear.
Is this a long con?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's a long con.
Yeah.
No, so
yeah, but I agree. Yeah. That's of that same thing where, without talking about specific situations, going in and people seeing you and you represent, like, if they see you, they know something. It's like, I can only assume it's similar to, like, if somebody is serving the military and then somebody in their out serving somewhere else, and then somebody from the military shows up at your door, it's like, something bad has happened. Especially late at night. Like, during the day, it's a little bit different, but anytime, like, after, like, 10, if someone sees, if I'm in a college, someone sees me walk through the hospital, they're just like, it's almost like a black cat. Like, they don't want to, like, acknowledge my presence because they don't want to invite negativity, or death into their space. That's a very real, I agree. That's a very real thing.
Yeah, because we can't control how people perceive us. And then in that high stakes situation where she has so much grief upon grief upon grief, and then you become the outlet for that. So even though you couldn't speak, you could feel everything she was directing toward you. Yeah, and that leaves an impression, especially when you think your job is to minister, to offer some kind of gift of compassion, and then you're seen as the bringer of death.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Wow.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much.
That's so funny.